Welcome back to Database Internals Crashcasts. I'm Sheila, and I'm here with Victor to dive deeper into the world of databases. Before we begin, I'd like to remind our listeners to rate our podcast on whatever platform you're tuning in from. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more database enthusiasts like you.
That's right, Sheila. We truly appreciate your support. Today we're continuing our journey through the database architecture chapter, and we'll be exploring three-tier architecture. It's an exciting topic that builds on what we've discussed in previous episodes.
Absolutely, Victor. To kick things off, I have a quiz question for our listeners. How many tiers are typically found in a modern enterprise-level web application architecture? Is it 3, 4, or 5?
Oh, that's an intriguing question, Sheila. It really makes you think about the complexity of modern applications. Without giving away the answer, I'd say it's a great way to get our listeners thinking about the layers involved in application design. What do you think, Sheila?
I agree, Victor. It's not as straightforward as it might seem at first glance. But before we dive deeper, let's make sure our listeners are up to speed with some key terms. Victor, could you briefly explain what we mean by tiers in this context?
Certainly, Sheila. In database and application architecture, tiers refer to the logical and sometimes physical separation of components in a system. Each tier has a specific role and responsibility, and they work together to create a complete application. Now, Sheila, what's your understanding of the three-tier architecture?
Well, from what I know, three-tier architecture is a client-server architecture pattern that separates an application into three main logical tiers: the presentation tier, the application tier, and the data tier. Am I on the right track, Victor?
You're absolutely correct, Sheila. That's a great starting point. Let's break it down further. The presentation tier is what users interact with, typically a user interface. The application tier contains the business logic and processes the user's requests. And the data tier is where the data is stored and retrieved from, usually in a database. Each tier can be developed and maintained independently, which is one of the key advantages of this architecture.
That makes sense, Victor. It reminds me of a restaurant analogy. The presentation tier would be like the dining area where customers sit, the application tier would be the kitchen where food is prepared, and the data tier would be the pantry and refrigerator where ingredients are stored. Does that sound like an accurate comparison?
That's an excellent analogy, Sheila. It really helps visualize the concept. Just like in a restaurant, each tier in the three-tier architecture has its specific role, but they all work together to create the final experience. Now let's delve a bit deeper. What do you think are some advantages of this architecture over the two-tier architecture we discussed in our previous episode?
Well, I would imagine that having three separate tiers allows for better scalability. For example, you could upgrade the application server without touching the database or the client-side interface. Am I on the right track?
Absolutely, Sheila. Scalability is indeed one of the key advantages. You can scale each tier independently based on its specific needs. For instance, you might need more application servers during peak hours, but keep the same number of database servers. This flexibility is crucial for modern high-traffic applications. Another significant advantage is improved security. Can you think of why that might be?
I suppose it's because the data tier isn't directly accessible from the presentation tier. The application tier acts as a kind of middleman, doesn't it?
Exactly. This separation provides an additional layer of security. The database, data tier, is not directly exposed to the end user, reducing the risk of unauthorized access. The application tier can implement various security measures, like input validation and access control, before any data reaches the database.
That's fascinating, Victor. But I can imagine this architecture also comes with some challenges. What are some common pitfalls developers might face when implementing a three-tier architecture?
Great question, Sheila. One common challenge is maintaining consistency across the tiers, especially in large, complex systems. Another is the potential for increased latency due to the additional communication between tiers. Developers need to carefully design the interactions between tiers to ensure optimal performance.
I see. So, what are some best practices for implementing a three-tier architecture effectively?
Some key best practices include clearly defining the responsibilities of each tier, using standardized interfaces between tiers, implementing proper error handling and logging across all tiers, and ensuring efficient data transfer between tiers. It's also crucial to consider security at every level, not just relying on the separation of tiers.
That's really helpful, Victor. Before we wrap up, could you share a real-world example of three-tier architecture in action?
Certainly, a classic example is an e-commerce website. The presentation tier would be the web pages customers interact with. The application tier would handle things like user authentication, shopping cart management, and order processing. The data tier would store product information, user data, and order details in databases.
That really brings it all together, Victor. Now, let's reveal the answer to our quiz question. The typical number of tiers in a modern enterprise-level web application architecture is indeed 3, as we've discussed throughout this episode. However, it's worth noting that some complex systems might introduce additional tiers for specific purposes.
Absolutely, Sheila. While three-tier architecture is common and effective for many applications, the number of tiers can vary based on specific needs. The key takeaway is understanding the principle of separation of concerns and how it can be applied to create scalable, maintainable, and secure applications.
Thank you, Victor, for this enlightening discussion. To summarize, we've learned that three-tier architecture separates an application into presentation, application, and data tiers. This separation offers benefits like improved scalability, flexibility, and security, but also comes with challenges in implementation and performance optimization.
That's a great summary, Sheila. Remember, listeners, understanding these architectural concepts is crucial for anyone working with databases or developing large-scale applications.
Absolutely, Victor. And to our wonderful listeners, we hope you found this episode informative. If you did, please visit crashcasts.com and consider joining our Discord community. Your support on Patreon helps us continue producing these episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast. It really does make a difference. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of databases.